Yes, welcome to the Empowering Story. And I used to call it the Empowering Story Live, but this is episode 3 of, let's say, the brand new format of this podcast that is solely focused on the healing of sexually abuse through writing stories and sharing your stories and why that's so important. And today we have a guest, and the guest, as you saw already in the opening scene, is Elisabeth Henderson, and I'm so stoked about it. Elisabeth decided at some point in time to not only have coaching with the Empowering Story program and me, but also asked help into publishing her story in the form of a book. So I'm going to give that already away, The Courage to Own My Own Truth. So recently published, and we're going to have a series of podcast interviews with Elisabeth. She's so generous to do that with us, but she's also very excited to tell about her book. But first, we actually would like to know, okay, what has led up to that point of the book. So that will be the series of this mini series of podcasts with Elisabeth Henderson, Elisabeth with an S in this case. And the first part is, Elisabeth, what is your story? And the second part will be, why did you decide to write in a book, and how was that? And then, of course, in the third and then last of the episode series, we're going to do what will the book do for her, what will she hope to get out of it, and what have you not. So without further ado, let's see if she is with us already. And yes, there you are, Elisabeth. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm very excited. Thank you for being in our podcast, in our show, The Empowering Story. This is only episode 3 of this season, Elisabeth, and it's a brand new format. Most people who have listened to me in the past might know it also as Tell, the Everyday Life Lesson podcast. And then we decided to keep all these episodes available for you people. If you want to go back and hear me talk about healing from sexual abuse, then you might find the Elisabeth in there one more time as well. I think we had a talk, or I talked about you, something like that. Anyhow, you wrote a book and you published the
Yes, I
book.
do.
Yeah, do you
Yes,
remember what date
yes.
that was when we published the book?
I think it was June 7th, actually.
It was June 7th, that's correct, when that came out. And I'll show it one more time. It's now available on Amazon. The Courage to Own My Own Truth, From Hidden Pain to Healing Light. I hope you all pick up a copy. It supports more than only Elisabeth in her story, but it will probably also give a lot of encouragement and empowerment to other women. So today you heard me talk about, Elisabeth, that I would like to do this podcast series in 3 parts, right? And the first part is about your story. You're very brave to tell what happened to you, but maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit first so that people get to know you before we get into it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, and I live in Texas. And I decided to write my book on an incident of sexual abuse that I suffered and what happened next. And it's a story that I told myself I would never tell anybody because of all the shame around it. It's just something I couldn't believe actually happened to me when it happened at the beginning. And it's a story that I decided I wasn't going to tell anybody. And then when I was approached about writing my story and telling my story, not long after you had published your own story, and I decided to go through with it. I decided I was ready.
Cool.
And
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah. Before we go into the story, so we know now that you live in Texas. Is there anything more that you want to tell us about you so that people get to know you a little bit better and start to understand the context of all this?
okay. So when the story starts, I tell about my love for the performing arts and my love for music, dance, theater, opera. I love it all. I absolutely do. And so I had gotten involved in performing arts after a long time after high school. I hadn't been involved in a while. Now, I had taken social dancing as something that I did. I've done competitions in social dancing. I love dance so much. It's something that I even do now. but I had taken up playing the harp,
Mm-hmm.
which is an instrument that I found after a long bout of depression, and an instrument that I fell in love with. And this is as an adult. And the community really inspired me. The music is gorgeous, and that's something that I decided to do, and I still play now.
Okay. How long is that ago? What age did you start to play, and how long is that ago?
Oh my goodness. So I'm not going to give away my age, but
No.
let's see. I started playing in 2016,
Okay.
actually.
So
And
about 8 years ago.
yeah, about
Yeah,
2015,
yeah,
2016.
it's good for people to get the timeline. And the instrument
Yeah.
playing the harp is important in your story. So that's why I asked a little bit more about that. So why the harp? Why not the violin? Why not the piano? Why not all the other
Well,
beautiful classical
well, it's a funny
instruments?
story. Yeah, it's a funny story. I had having a bout with depression, and I had taken antidepressants before, and I was in college, and I was really overwhelmed. And so I decided to go to a wellness fair. And I decided I was going to find a natural way to deal with these mood issues and the depression and the anxiety. And so I took myself to a festival, a wellness festival, and there was someone outside playing the lap harp. And he asked me why I was there. And I told him I'm looking for a way to deal with my depression. He said, "Have you tried sound therapy?" And I was like, "No, this sounds really hokey jokey. I'm not really into this like woo out there, these types of new healing modalities, like that I wasn't sure if they worked or not. But I'm like, I'm here to give it a try." So I went, and he asked me if I was interested in playing. So he just put it in my lap, and I started playing. And I was playing it, and I just, this sound is so gorgeous. I don't know how to play anything, but this music is beautiful. And so this man, he was a lot older, and he said his music had gotten him through his bout with colon cancer. And playing the lap harp when he was, going through chemo really helped him get through it.
Yeah.
And so he left me there to play. And I look up, and it's everyone's like leaving the festival, packing up all their things. And I'm sitting there outside on the grass playing the harp like a little hippie. And I was like, "Why is everyone leaving?" And he's, "Oh, you've been sitting there for like almost 2 hours now." And I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And yeah, and that's how it started. And then he invited me, he told me his wife was a harp teacher. And so I went to their home, and I picked out a harp to play.
Wow.
And
Yeah. Cool.
that's how it started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful instrument. It's a little bit like, it feels a little bit like an old-fashioned instrument, to be honest. Yeah,
Hmm.
and then yes, yeah, and you talk about lap harp. That's one of the smaller versions, right? A lot of people have probably seen these huge, big harps, right? Where
Concert grand. Yeah.
yeah, and then you have the harps that the angels play on that are even smaller, right? They fly around like Cupid, and they fly around with a little harp. But anyhow, yeah, it's a beautiful instrument. What is so specific about this instrument compared to other snare instruments? Let's keep it like that, like a guitar or.
Yeah, the guitar and the harp, they both ring. That's something that guitar and harp have in common. Not as many people play the harp, though, as most other instruments. A lot of people play violin,
Yes.
piano,
Yeah.
guitar. Those are
Yeah.
hugely
Yeah.
popular instruments, but not as many people play the harp, but that's changing. More people are picking it up. They're
Okay.
starting to realize there are other sizes other than the six
Yeah.
foot, $50,000
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
type. So,
Okay. So you mentioned already that you were suffering from depression. Of course, we're very sorry to hear that. It led you up to find ways to express yourself. And 2016, if I am correctly, is also about the time that we start to meet each other a little bit. First in a dance studio, and then later on also I've been your life coach for a good part of after 2016. So we know it's not that Elisabeth is a stranger to us. But so you got very deep into that classical world, a classical musical world at some point in time, and that led to way other things than only playing the harp, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I started to volunteer in the music industry, classical music and performing arts. just volunteering here and there. And then eventually I was hired to working with some contract roles as well.
Okay.
And
What?
that's just like doing coordinating competitions, helping coordinate the competitions and events and organizing them. So that was just equally as exciting because you get to meet tons of new people who share your interests, share passions, and your love for live performances of all kinds. So
Yeah.
that was really awesome. And that was a very life-changing thing for me. Changed the way I travel, the way I think about music. And
Okay.
even the harp even showed me different ways to approach things in life
Nice.
as well,
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
when you're practicing a new art form, you start to pick up habits that can help you understand the process of taking baby steps, going slow and paying attention and those
Yeah.
types of things. And I wasn't expecting that, but learn a lot about yourself in those types of pursuits.
Yeah,
So,
well, yeah, learning it like that is a discipline. You need to do it daily, and it's your daily
right.
it's your daily habits, and the change of your daily habits, as I always say, that eventually will change your life. So you start to get exposed to that. It's an expression, right? Performance art has always a lot to do with expression, but with that, of course, came also in that you start to meet people who played it on a different level, had it as their profession even.
Hmm.
And with that also came in that you saw people who are teaching and playing it on a higher level. Can you tell us a little bit about that world? I'm a dancer, so I know a lot about how that works in
Right,
the dance world, but I
right.
know very little how that works in the classical instruments world.
Yes, when I was working and volunteering and then eventually working in different organizational positions. Yes, you're dealing with people who are in the top like 1 to 5%, like people
Oh
who
wow,
get to play in major orchestras for a
wow,
living, major city
wow.
orchestras for a living, or the people who are the future players and musicians in productions of major organizations, major world organizations, huge organizations too.
Yeah,
So you start to see those people and the ones that are up and coming, especially at the competitions and the festivals. You
yeah.
get to see all of those things.
Yeah, so you saw
So,
the beauty of that world, but you saw also start to see a little bit the downside and the drawback of highly competitive
mhm,
world where only a
right.
very few people can really make it. That's not so much different than the dance world, right? I'm very blessed that I'm a professional dancer, but yeah, you start to see that too. Tell us a little bit about how competitive is that world? How hard is that world?
Right. Yes, there's a lot of people there from the world's top educational musical conservatories or educational institutions, music conservatories, people who have spent their whole life doing this, pretty much doing this one thing, and made a lot of sacrifices, both financially, socially. They're really spending most of their time or a massive part of their time honing their craft and becoming better at playing their instrument and
Yeah,
pretty much not much else. They
yeah.
eat, sleep, and breathe that one thing. But it was awesome at times to be able to like support people like that by,
Mm-hmm.
organizing competitions and everything. But that's like something that you see. It's very serious. They
It's very
spend most of
serious.
their
Yeah,
waking hours with their
yeah.
instrument or with people who play instruments.
Yeah, that you
So
had that you had
other musicians.
yeah, that you had admiration for it. That you were you thinking, oh man, I
Oh,
wish I was that. I wish I was that. Or
yeah, it's just looking at it, there's a huge trade-off there with a lot of people. It's your entire life, your social life, your professional life, and your personal life is in with musicians and playing instruments and traveling and teaching. And that's pretty much all three of your lifestyles, your social life, everything.
yeah,
So you see that and you're like, oh my goodness, there are some people there so talented and you have these interesting personalities and really you meet some really awesome people and you're like to have that level of discipline, of course. I'm like, I would love to have that level of discipline to be able to stick with something to that degree for that many years. But at the same time, it's a lot of work and it's a lot they go through. It's facing a lot of competition.
yeah,
A lot of competition. They face sometimes really harsh criticism
Yeah, it's a lot
by
of
people
scrutiny.
in and outside of that industry for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
Like,
but
that's the hard part. Beautiful part is being able to share it with everyone because
yeah,
they get to
definitely.
do that. So,
Yeah, so you were more in a supportive role, but I could see that's where I started as a dancer. I came in a little bit late in life in dancing, but I immediately aspired life as a competitor and as a professional dancer. That's definitely not for everyone. Did you had that feeling that you wanted to become a professional classical music player on a harp, or did you say no?
no, there's no chance of that happening because I didn't start when I was 5. Most people start playing instruments when they're like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old.
Yeah.
I
Well,
didn't. But now,
yeah.
if you started as an adult, there's no chance of that happening.
Yeah.
So,
No, yeah. The fact that it might not happen does not mean that you don't want it, right? Yeah. So that those are
yeah,
two.
I mean, if you want something like that, you'd have to have a massive amount of support
Oh,
growing up
cool, cool,
doing it.
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
But that world, and I'm leading up a little bit to the events that started to happen in your life, so that people have a little bit of a context, right? You started off very simple, playing the harp, picking it up, getting lessons from a local teacher, and then you stepped into this world where you actually started to support organizations of competitions. You actually met and saw the top levels in their craft of classical music instruments. So hence you also met celebrities in that world. Is that yeah?
Oh, really? Definitely. I've met some of the people who were in the top positions, some of the top positions in their craft and in their instrument, some of the most sought after teachers.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I'm sure you saw a lot of admiration. And then what's part of your book, people can read it in your book, but it's always different, by the way, people. Even if Elisabeth tells her whole story now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to read the book, because it's always different when it's put in the book. So we're giving the story away, but promise me that you also pick up the book. It's completely different, right? And I was giving that context because people have to understand what happened to you when you met this special sought after teacher and quite of a celebrity in this world, why you were drawn to his teaching and his personality. So tell us, jump a little bit to
Um,
that point.
okay, yeah, we had this person come to this area to teach, and I had read about this person in the magazines. I was like, "Oh, this is great!" And some of the other people in the area who were going to be working with him, he's teaching at major universities, privately, performing publicly. And I was, oh, this is exciting. Or to meet this teacher who has traveled the world, seen many countries, taught at many places, prodigy level teacher. I was like, oh, this is going to be so exciting. You get to meet someone and meet people, more people in the profession who've mastered this instrument and have composed their own music. And that's always exciting when you get to meet new
Oh yeah,
teachers.
absolutely. Yeah.
Always very exciting. I know you get to when you were younger, you got to meet some of the world famous people in dance,
I
you
still
know, and
do.
that's
I still
yeah, and you
do.
still get to,
I
yeah,
still do. I
yeah, and
still
that's always
travel.
exciting.
Yeah, I travel for dance myself. You know that I'm allowed to teach around the world, and but I still meet people that I teach with or something like that. And yeah, I know that world. It's exciting. And some
Mhm.
people that I met, oh, they were a little bit of a disappointment as a personality, not much more than only the dance. And other people, I was just in full admiration. I could
Right,
win, and some of them became actually my teachers. So, yeah,
right,
that's super exciting. Yeah, so he was a
right.
very well-known person in that instrument and in the world, and he had his education, I'm assuming. And so you met him. How did that go?
Yes, I met the person, and so we're just talking, having a nice conversation. Really funny, engaging person, listening really well, good jokes, really sharp wit, and so this is having a good conversation with the person. And it wasn't anything like romantic. It was just talking, having fun. Everyone was really excited to have him here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
And then, so I had someone ask me if I could drop them off at the airport.
okay.
and or drop them off at their hotel near the airport because they had to catch their plane.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So before I went to drop them off. I had a bunch of bags that they had brought because they had come from overseas. And so I was like, okay, I'll help them bring their bags in because they had 4 or 5
Yeah.
bags. It was going to
How
take a
many people
while.
were that?
Hmm?
So it was
How
this
many people?
one person, or it was a group of people?
Just one person.
Okay, yeah. All right.
And so I was going to help them. And so I went into the hotel to bring them. And so just push their bags in their room and leave. And then that's when the attack happened.
Yeah. Okay. So fully unwarranted, no reason, not even a
Didn't see
suspicion
it
from
coming.
yours. Yeah, not even. You had a good time with him and other people while you guys were together. Someone
We'd all had
suggested,
dinner together. Yeah, we'd all had dinner together, and I thought I was just dropping them off.
yeah,
And so after they attacked me, I had to make a run for it because they
yeah.
wouldn't let go of me.
Okay, share as much as you can and as you want to, but for our listeners, and specifically for the listeners who came into similar places, I want to explain this a little bit what happened, right? So that's why I painted that picture, or Elisabeth
Hmm.
painted a picture of the classical music industry and all these people that you meet, and then you meet some celebrities in that world, and they have some sort of an authority. We have admiration for them if we are students or work in that world. And most of the time, that's what it is. That's just great. And in this case, Elisabeth was asked to bring him to the airport, and he had to stay a night over, as I assumed. And so you helped him with his luggage, which was very nice of you. And then I assume conversations were still going, and maybe a little bit laughter here and there. And then you put the suitcases in the
Yeah, I
bed,
pushed
and
them in there.
pushed them in
Yes.
then, and then you wanted to
And,
say bye bye. And then what happened?
and then so he takes my face and starts kissing me.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm not doing this right now. Like, I need to get home.
Yeah.
And that's when he grabbed me like this, like in a bear hug. And I started struggling. And then I just stopped. And I asked him, I said, are you going to rape me? And he said, I could fucking rape you.
Okay.
And he wouldn't let me go.
That
And
must be scary.
so then, yeah, so I start struggling and I fall over. And I had this out of body experience where I was absolutely terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Okay.
could not, it's like I could not get back in my body. I
Yeah.
could like literally see myself in another part of the room.
Yeah. Like you are a bystander almost. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was like, oh, holy
Mm.
crap. Like, this is it.
Okay. Yeah.
This is
Okay.
going to be
Yeah.
bad,
That's
humiliating and bad. This is going to be bad.
yeah. I will ask you a little bit more. It's very brave for you to tell that here. And by the way, and I want to let the listeners know that in the empowering story, we talk about real stuff. And this is real stuff, and this out of body experience or feeling that you're a bystander is a very common thing that we hear from people who are abused or who have had attempts of rapes or who had full-on rapes. There's no qualification in that, because some people say, hey, could you not do anything? Could you not yell? Could you not run away? All this kind of stuff. You want to, but for some reason your whole system shuts down, and there's no way to do that. You can learn how to do that, by the way, but that's a moot point at this point in time in Elisabeth's situation, right? Now, I don't know if you see this on if you see this on video or recording, then you actually can see that Elisabeth is not a very big, tall person, right? That could take me in a chokehold and smash me against the wall. So she is actually a pretty tiny person as well. So that makes it the physicality of all this, I can only imagine. Doesn't have to take a big man to do that. Besides the almost paralyzation of the situation is also the physique, the physical capabilities that you have compared to a man who typically are more muscular. is amazing. Now, I want the listeners to know that sometimes they feel ashamed for similar situations that they could not escape. And there's no reason to feel ashamed about that. But anyhow, you were still in that room. You saw it more almost like from an outside perspective than from within. What happened next?
Then it was like I was having this out of body experience, and somehow I got away. He was pulling on me, and I got away, and I ran out of the room.
Yeah.
And I was running, and I remember it's like I couldn't feel my legs. I was running, and
Yeah.
I stopped, and I turned around, and he's sitting there at the end of the hall, just watching me running.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, holy crap, this is like some Law and Order
Movie
special
situation.
victims
Yeah.
unit. Yeah,
Yeah.
crap. That's
Crap.
exactly
Crap.
what this is.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, terrifying, horrifying. So the whole, from the moment you went into the room, and it's not a police investigation. It sounds a little bit like that at this point. But just to give just a little bit context, how much time was it from the moment you went in the room, the situation happened, this attempt to rape? Let me say that very clearly, and the kissing already happened. None of this was with consent. It's something that I will explain as well. None of them was with consent until you running out of the room. Do you have any idea how long that is?
I'm not exactly sure how long it was. It could have been maybe 5 minutes, almost 10 minutes. But I do clearly remember getting in my car and looking at the time and not understanding
What happened? Yeah.
what happened. Like, how long was I in there
Yeah.
and what actually happened? I can remember not being able to understand like the time. And I looked at the clock and I start like laughing to myself. I was like, oh, you like that you were nearly raped just now and you somehow got away, Elisabeth. I don't know
Yeah.
how you got away. And I'm like speaking to
Good.
myself in third person. Good job, you got away. I can't like that would have been bad.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. It was already bad. Let's also put a pin in that, right? That,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it
That's
was.
that
But it's
is
just kind of,
already.
I'm like thinking to myself, oh my, I'm trying to lighten it up in my head so I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
feel like
It's an
breaking
escape.
down.
It was an
Right.
escape, right? And the reason why I wanted to stay with this for a little bit in this interview, because if you look at it, let's say it was 15 minutes, right? The whole thing together, 15 minutes. It was no more than that. But what the remarkable thing is of your story, and we'll go into that, is that some people wave that away. Okay, so it's only 15 minutes. It was not even really rape. It was an attempt to rape. But the effect that it doesn't always happen to everyone, but the fact that it can happen to you is actually what, the story of you is about. And I think it's very brave to come forward with what happened to you afterwards. It started already with talking to you as in the third person. You were lucky, you laughed a little bit, this release of energy, cathartic is how we call that in terms. Tell me about the days and the weeks after that.
See, like in the upcoming week, I'd say like the next week, that was on a weeknight. Later on that week, I was already scheduled to talk to my therapist just to check in, and I told them this story, and they're like, you have got to tell what happened. You have got to tell what happened. And I was like, no way. Because people are going to hear this story and they're going to be like, why the hell were you trying to help him with his bag? That's odd. What were you thinking? What were you doing? All I could think was, how did that even happen? And I'm like, I am never going to tell anybody this story and no one who can do anything about it or who knows this person. So they're going to be asking me, they might think it's my fault that this happened. That's
Yeah,
all
but
I could think. Was like, they might think it's my fault.
that's where the guilt comes in. Huh? So we'll definitely in the other episodes we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But that's where the guilt comes in. So you felt guilty. You thought, oh, I should have never helped him. He was a nice person, and
thought he was, yes.
Or you thought he was. Yeah, he was nice till that point. Or you
Right.
thought he was. But your therapist immediately said, you have to tell it. What did he mean? You have to tell it to him. You have to tell it to the world. You have to tell it to the
Well,
police. What did he mean?
they said, yes, they had said you need to report this to the police and you need to tell whoever was responsible for arranging his visit what happened. You have to report this person because
Okay.
otherwise this is going to linger and this is not going to be okay. When I told one of my friends who doesn't know the person, and she was like, you're going to have PTSD behind this. And I'm like, I wasn't really raped. She's, it doesn't matter. You're going to get, you're going to be traumatized behind this, even though you weren't actually raped, you were assaulted. And I was like, I cannot do this. Like, people are going to think, oh, you're crazy for having been in this situation. I didn't know it was going to be a situation, but at the time I was, I really just need to forget that this happened because I'm fine now and I'm safe.
Yeah.
That's what I kept telling myself. I told myself that for like weeks and then months. Like nothing happened, as in it's not like you're pregnant. It's like,
Yeah.
what is there to tell?
Yeah, there's a different. There now suddenly two other things came up. First, we had the guilt. Could have prevented the situation, and I didn't. Then comes the diminishing. It was maybe only one time, or he probably didn't mean it this way. And I'm just talking a little bit in the lingo that other people in similar situations sometimes talk to themselves. If you have a pen, write this down. Right. So first the guilt came up, and now the diminishing came up. Oh, it's already passed and I will get through it myself. So to diminish that, so not acknowledging what happened. And at the same time also that it happened to you, I can hear that very clearly. There's a feeling of shame coming over you, and with shame very often comes self-blame. You start to blame yourself in the situation. There's nothing to worry about. I will be fine. Now, I must say your other friend probably meant well, but let's not put labels on other people if we don't know about it, right? Let's not immediately use words like PTSD. It's a good advice for people to help you to do things, but as a coach in this field, I also would like to say that we need to give people back the reins of their own life by saying you have to do this, you have to do that, or else this will happen. You trigger already that these things will happen. Does that make sense? So I think that's also, if people are getting into this situation, I also would like the listeners to learn from your story and from what you now also as a coach has to offer to how we go about these things, right? So it's not to blame the other people at all, besides the person who did this to you. It's just saying, hey, this is what I have learned over many years of working with people in these situations. So you started to deal with it very internally, conflicted. What physically and mentally, if you have to just say it shortly, what happened to you actually? How does it started to show up? You write a lot about your eating disorders, but bring me a little bit. I met you then, but bring me a little bit into that world. How that internal conflict and this turmoil, where that led you to.
So yeah, I was trying to suppress it by just getting on with my life. I tried. So I decided I'm going to apply for a promotion at work, get a better new residence, which I had been working on before. I was just out of grad school, and I'm just decided I'm just going to move on with my life and do some of the things that I wanted to do and go to the places where I wanted to go. And I was excited. And it was almost like, and it's wonderful that I got out of grad school, I got a promotion at work and got a new residence, but it was like I was trying to focus on those things to reassure myself that I was fine. Look, I'm functioning really well.
Yeah,
I'm doing fine. Work is going well. Friendships are going well. I'm fine. And it's almost like you think somebody can see what's going on in your head because
yeah,
it's so chaotic in your mind. But everything on the outside was looking good.
yeah.
So I'm just kind of
Well,
like, oh, hoping nobody sees this, and I'm moving on, and things are getting better, and I'm just going to focus on these things
yeah,
instead of focusing on the fact that was really excited to meet this person, And I thought
Yeah.
that I wasn't expecting any of that to happen, but I just try
Yeah.
to focus on achieving and doing good things in my life
Yeah.
as if I wanted it to smooth out
Yeah.
the turmoil
Yeah.
and the confusion on the inside.
Yeah, and it's not a bad strategy at all, Elizabeth. It appeared that it didn't fully work for you. For a lot of people, it actually does work. They start to focus on other things, on family, on study, on career, on hobby, and it smooths out and it starts to dissolve in another way. There is no one way how we deal with abuse. There's no one way how we deal with PTSD, and there is no way how we deal with assault. And so we should never put a recipe on anyone. We should always look at the situation. So for some people, that does work, right? I just didn't do it for you, and there's no reason for you to either be ashamed or feel different about it. What didn't work for you didn't work for you, and so other things started to show up in your life, which can be related to that just one event. And I'm saying that on purpose. How were you? How were your mental and physical state?
I would say my mental state was like going back and forth. Should I tell?
Mm-hmm.
Is this person really this crazy? And then I started to wonder, I wonder who else they did this to. I
Okay.
wonder who else has been a victim because they felt very entitled to get sexual action with someone. So I was like, I wonder who I kind of wondered in the back of my head, I wonder who they've done this to because this is obviously a habit. But then I my mental state was just started to go back and forth. I could feel like this tension building inside of me. And the more the tension was building up, the more I was like, okay, you need to focus on the good things that are happening in your life. You don't need to give this any more of your thought or time. Just move on to something else. And all the while, I remember after I had gotten into my new residence and then I had moved into my new residence and was working, I remember I had gone shopping and got a few weeks worth of food. And I remember a month later, most of this food still being in the fridge.
Yeah.
And I was skipping lunch at work and sleeping in my car. It was
Yeah.
like I started to just feel like mentally and physically exhausted on the inside, yet I was still going through the motions. So if I'm and so I'm and at that point I wasn't even connecting my behaviors to what had happened. I'm
No.
just like, you're just overwhelmed with all the new changes. Like you just need to adjust, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I had gone to the doctor and for my yearly visit, and they're like, your weight has plummeted dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not going to name the numbers, but they were wondering what was going on. Was there anything going on? And I was like, no, I just had a lot of life changes. And with me, I've always been a person with my life changed, my eating habits changed a little bit. And that's something I had to work on in recovery. But yeah, I had attributed it to just the changes
Yeah.
in my life,
Yeah.
nothing else.
Yeah, and here is the thing as well. And that is all true, right? Because it was not the only one thing that happened to your life. You did other things too. And getting a new job, getting a promotion, graduations, we would all put them in the bucket of big life changes, right? It's always a combination of. It is always very dangerous at the same time, although I do this, I do a lot with abused people, but it's always very dangerous to put everything on one thing. It is the combination of factors that brings you to a certain point, right? The instigation event, or how do you say that, right? Or in this case, I could actually say the instigator. But that probably is what happened then in that hotel room not too long ago when you actually started to see that you got eating disorders. And that became very bad for you, right? That became even life-threatening. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Oh, definitely. My eating habits. I'm always a person already who pays attention to what they eats a balanced diet. I don't believe in any extreme dieting, but I've always been a person who like has the good foods and the bad foods, and just shop the perimeter of the grocery store and nowhere else. Never shop in the middle of the grocery store. I already always been a person who's like into being healthy,
Yes.
but I noticed as the months went on and the starvation started to progress,
Yes.
I'd stop taking lunch at work, that even my mental state began to get even worse, deteriorate even worse, because it was like I couldn't think clearly to work. I couldn't think clearly to learn my new job. I just could not function.
Yeah.
I just could not function the same way. And I know diet feeds your brain. Your brain and heart have to have calories to work properly, and a minimum amount. But at the same time, it was just like almost eating had become just a complete afterthought. It was like something I was just nibbling here and there on food, but it's like I was so full on the inside of all of this like chaos going back and forth. Should I tell on this person? Are they really this insane? And did that really happen?
Yeah.
I can't believe that happened. And it just got to the point where I wasn't able to work anymore.
Yeah.
And what I was recommended by my psychologist to enter in treatment full
Yeah.
time. So
Which you did, right? So that comes to
I did.
another point here. You had to step back from normal life, so to speak, and take care of yourself. So that's another brave step I think you did. But what I also want to show to people, if you didn't pick up on that, is the symptoms and the things that Elisabeth started to display. It's immediately very hard to link to one thing only, right? If you dig a little bit deeper, then you can actually see that. But you would think, what has an attempt to rape to do with what you eat, right? Does that make sense? That some people
Right.
think, oh, I had an attempt to rape, I had an attempt of rape, and now I'm afraid of connecting to men. That makes more sense. So for a lot of
Hmm.
people, having something that feels unrelated doesn't make sense, and that could be also, and was for you also very confusing. Why is one thing happening, and that seems so far? What you also could see, and this is also the time when you and I started to talk, I remember that very clearly, is when you started to be concerned about other people. What's going on in this world? Is this just a one singular event that stands on its own, or is there more of this type of misuse of power and authority? Is that more going on? To be really honest, as a specialist, that thought is really beautiful. And now you will hear that in episode number 3, that you actually do a lot of work in there. But at that time, that thought in itself was not very helpful because it only added more to the confusion and the
Right.
turmoil. But you couldn't help it. It's just your beautiful mind. You immediately started to also focus on other people and how that affected them. In the end, that probably came one of your strong points and maybe part of your salvation even, and your healing. But at that point in time, it only put more oil on the fire. Just also for time reason, and this is, I think, a really good point to, if you could finish with that, how you went through that time when you had to take weeks in a clinic and take care of yourself, what that did for you physically and mentally.
The first thing I noticed is it helped me slow down a bit.
Okay.
It helped everything slow down
Yeah.
because my inner treatment and everything in my mind and my body, and it sounds like I was slowing down physically anyway.
Yeah.
But it's for when I look back now, it's like I had all this energy
Yeah.
on the inside, all this chaos and this energy inside that I couldn't hold down anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like the treatment forced me to slow down and to focus on how I'm experiencing my emotions.
Yes.
And that's not very easy for someone like me who says something's going terrible, push through, bulldoze it, move on.
Yeah.
And I had to slow down and sit with how I felt and
Yeah.
how I thought without telling myself, okay, it's wrong to think this, it's wrong to feel this, it's wrong to want something to change automatically. You just want everything to just be better. There, I had to learn to just sit with feeling the
Yeah.
embarrassment, the guilt,
Yeah.
the turmoil, the chaos on the inside without judging it. I quickly began to realize they would ask me during meal times and during therapy. It's all we're doing is eating and going to therapy sessions, group therapy, single therapy, not couples, maybe small group therapy, large group therapy, and eating. That's all we're doing.
Yeah. How long was that treatment?
It was almost 6 months,
Yeah,
about five
that's
months, 5.5 months,
five
six
and a half
months.
months. Yeah, significant, significant. Yeah, and Elisabeth said something really profound. She has been part of also in helping her to become what we call a shadow light coach. And she's excellent in it. But one of the things that we teach there is that all emotions are always welcome, and look at them without any judgment. What you do with them is something else, but you always need to embrace all emotions. And that, hopefully, listeners, that could be also something for you. Never be ashamed for the emotion that you have. You will come to a place of power where you can do with the emotions what's necessary, but at first you need to welcome them. Don't send them away. Welcome them.
Right.
Beautiful. 6 months, 6 months, and then things start to change for you a little bit more positively. If you, on hindsight, it feels actually in a quick way, but at that time maybe it felt very slow. But that's actually, Elisabeth, where I would love to start to pick up your story in the next episode of this podcast series. And I said 3, and if it becomes 4, then it becomes 4. Who knows
Right.
what it is? And let me do a little bit of summary, right? Where Elisabeth already was looking for things to help her with her personal life, and specifically in the area of depression. Started to fall in love with performance art like dance, but one thing in particular was playing classical instrument, and that, if for as far as coincidence exists, she just came in contact with that, and that led her to step into a world that was unknown to her at that time. But she started to do volunteer and work at classical music instrument competitions, or players competitions, I should say, where she met the top of the people in that world. And so she also got in contact with higher level teachers who travel around the US or the world, maybe even to teach other people how to play the instrument, are often coaches and mentors for other people in power and authority. That's basically what you need to hear here. And people that are often very admired, that's what you hear here as well. Now, Elisabeth did something very small and helping a person to bring to the airport and drop him off at the hotel, and in the hotel was an attempt of rape. And listen to my words very carefully. It's an attempt to rape, but don't diminish it. Something happened to you drastically profound without Elisabeth consent. And that's what we need to understand. When it happens against your consent, it's not only, that sounds like a legal term, but I don't care about the legal term. I care about that something happened to Elisabeth without her willing that. So it seems like a small thing, but it apparently is not. Or it could be a really big thing, and it led to Elisabeth to eating disorder and 6 months taking out of her life to recoup, and hopefully she learned way more than she actually bargained for too. So that's maybe the beautiful part of it. And that's where I would like to pick up the story, Elisabeth. Is that good for you?
I Sounds great to me.
Yeah,
Sounds
sounds good. I know
wonderful.
you have a lot more
Yeah,
to
I look
share.
forward to
Yeah, yeah,
talking
and,
again.
and and I am very curious how this all unpacked and how that actually led to publishing it in a book and what people can learn from it as well. But I think you gave really good context of where you were at that point in your life. Obviously, you do really great at this moment, right? It's a while ago already, so that's a good thing. But we always want to know, it's the hero story. What have you been through, and is there a way for you to help other people who go through a similar thing and to just help them through this? We already said a couple of things, right? Don't label people, don't force them to do anything, things like that. But I will come back on that later. You know,
Yeah,
so
definitely, definitely. There's a lot I learned about myself during that time
yeah,
and the way the mind works, the way the body works.
yeah,
I learned in the recent years, I've learned that a lot of our thoughts come from our nervous system signals. And I'm starting to learn more about that because a lot of us think that our thoughts are the enemy when it comes to these types of situations. And it's your thoughts aren't your number one enemy. They're not the enemy at all. processing the emotions that came up when all of these things happened. It's a huge part of it. And those are some of the things that I learned about in eating disorder treatment. So it'll be exciting to learn more about those things and how to help other people and support other people who've been through the similar situations.
Yeah, no, beautiful. So could not be more proud of you. Definitely also was proud that you decided to publish the book with the Empowering Story publishing part of what we do. We knew each other already because I had the honor to coach you through a couple of these things that we do. We can talk about that in another episode as well. But already I want to thank you so much for sharing this part of your story. It's one of the harder part of the story as always is the event of the abuse. For some people that goes on years. For some people it could be one event. And like I said, let's not weigh them, let's not label them, let's see what came out of it, but also let's see how you can come out on the other end in a much stronger way. Now, we don't want anyone to go through this and still be a strong person. Don't misunderstand us.
Right.
But if you happen to go through it because life gave you and dealt you this card, then there are ways to come out really strong. All right, Elisabeth, that was episode 1. Thank you again for sharing. Do you want to leave the listeners with one last comment before I close it off and make sure that they come to part 2?
Yeah, definitely. I would just tell our listeners that if you've been through one incident or multiple incidents of abuse, it's not your fault. And your mind and your body are not the enemy. And to just let yourself sit with those things whenever they come up. And you're allowed to start healing from it. It's not something that you have to carry with you for your whole life, or something that you have to let control every decision you make from now on. And that's just like something you have to be patient with yourself if you want to heal from these things, because it takes a lot of time to heal. And it's a long process sometimes, but be patient with yourself as you learn to heal, and don't try to heal alone. You do have to heal yourself, but don't try to heal alone, because that's a very lonely, and you can get sometimes into a dangerous place where you're berating yourself and shaming yourself. Heal together. Let's heal together from all these things.
Let's heal together. Beautifully said. All right. So we get definitely more to those kind of things as well. All right. With that, I'll talk to you in the next episode. I'll talk for a moment to our listeners for a moment. Wait for me, Elisabeth, so we have a little bit of an after talk. With that, I say, oops, that was a little bit too fast. With that, I say goodbye, Elisabeth, and I'll see you very soon. Yes, that was Elisabeth Henderson with our first episode on Elisabeth Henderson in her book, The Courage to Own My Own Truth. We already learned about the story of Elisabeth, how there was an attempt to rape, and how in the end that event led to eating disorders and life-threatening, I could say. She was very careful in saying that, but it was life-threatening. So we'll hear more how this story evolves in the next episode, so I hope you follow us then. Talking about that, you can find the Empowering Story podcast always on Apple, on Spotify, and on basically the major podcast channels. But you can also follow me on YouTube at Jean Dorff, or my own website, jeandorff.com, or theempoweringstory.com. And if you cannot get enough of me, go to Facebook and also The Empowering Story, where we have a community for over 1,200 women who have been through similar stories and similar events, and who are looking to share their story and heal together, as Elisabeth said. So with that, I, as always, thank you. This was episode 3 of this podcast. I'll hope to hear you all real soon. This was Shah, and I'll wish you a really good day and a good week from here on.